World of Warcraft has a ton of playable races. There's a ton of player races. Probably the not maybe not the most playable races out of any MMO, out of any RPG game, but it's probably somewhere at the top of the list. I haven't checked that before I started talking about it, but it really has a lot of player races. But you know what? It could always use more, because in the Warcraft lore and in the game, there are dozens and dozens of really great, really interesting races that could make for really great player races. Races that I would personally love to play as characters. And believe me, I was a severe alcoholic in WoW, and I'm a severe alcoholic in every other game I play, because I always make a ton of characters, different races, different classes. I always try to test out everything, and in Skyrim I play everything except the main quest for a very long time, because let's be honest, in Skyrim the main quest is really friggin' boring. Here's a big dragon, go kill him. It's basically it. Like, the Civil War quest line is more interesting. Everything else is more interesting except the main quest line, but I'm getting off the topic. So, I'm a severe alcoholic, and I always create dozens of alts, dozens of different races and classes, and often I do not play them for very long, do not get them very far, much like in the Skyrim main quest line. But I always want to see more, and Warcraft has these dozens of player races, potential player races. In my TTRPG that I play on Discord with my friends, we can play any race we want, because it's not a system like D&D where you have to have defined racial traits from the start, because we pretty much can choose if we want to a racial trait on a character or if we want to go full on class, because we design every character individually. So we can play whatever we want, and we have characters of all kinds of races. Like, we have Naga PCs, we have regular Goblin PCs, and we have Arakoa PCs. We have most races that exist in the game we probably have. But in World of Warcraft, unfortunately, to have a player race, it comes with a lot of design. It comes with designing the player models. It comes with designing the starting zones, starting whole experiences with all the quest lines that lead to them, either joining a faction or just becoming a playable race by working with the player factions. Like, did the Draxthir actually join the factions, or did they just take residence in Stormwind and Orgrimmar? I don't know if it was ever really truly explained. But they showed up in Stormwind and Orgrimmar, and they're technically a neutral race now, I think, and so are the Earthen, a neutral race, and I don't think they technically joined either faction. And I think this is going to be a trend from now on, that any race that is added is going to be neutral. But still, there were usually, when we were starting, we were getting all those races in pairs. Not pairs, not like the fruit pair. We were getting those races in twos, like Worgen and goblins, like Draenei and Blood Oaths. And perhaps it was a little bit limiting originally, because in the Burning Crusade they wanted to add Blood Oaths, and then they had to invent a race for the Alliance, and they invented the Draenei, which at the time was very maligned, because the retcon that came to be able to introduce them as the player race. Like, I didn't even have to do the retcon. They could have just given us the Draenei that were there. Like, sure, they're ugly, but I like playing ugly races. Like, I'm sure people would play even the ugly Draenei. Nowadays, Draenei are one of my favorite races, so I didn't really mind it anymore. But, perhaps it was a little bit limiting, constraining for the designers at the time to have to always come up with these couples of races. And nowadays, they can make all of them neutral. So they can add them one by one. But still, there is a ton of races, ton of very popular or very unique, cool races that could be added as player character races in World of Warcraft. Some of them which have been waiting for that chance for years, for decades, and we haven't seen them as playable. So this is my list of top 12 races that Blizzard needs to add as playable in World of Warcraft. The first one probably will not surprise anyone if you know me at all, at least outside the YouTube channel. If you knew me before, like from the old Twitter account, RP Twitter account that I used to have years ago, where I interacted with the developers and creative development and quest designers and community managers, and a few people at Blizzard knew me, and as a result I have an NPC named after my original character in the game. You should be seeing a picture of him here right now, taken straight from my head. Yes, this character is actually named after my original character. Because if you check the Twitter account that is now inactive because Twitter support now is awful, if you check that original Twitter account, it's older than this character have been added in Warlords of Draenor. So, I was legit at some point in the past. But, I wasn't American, so I couldn't go to events in the US. So, I think my popularity ended there. Anyway, if you knew me at all, and if you have seen this character now, you would know that my top first race, although the list isn't in any particular order, that my top first race that I would want to added in World of Warcraft is the Arakoa. And I personally prefer the Cursed Arakoa because those are the guys that we first met. Those are the guys that I first fell in love with. These creepy little skulking dudes, always a little hunched, delving into dark occult magic, with the dark gods and being mysterious, and hence my top original character that I use to identify in video game circles is often this Arakoa guy, Verok Crusher. So I love Arakoa because of their very unique aesthetics, their rich culture and history. Warlords of Draenor had its ups and downs, but definitely one of the biggest ups of Warlords for me was Spires of Arak. Really well done zone, really good story, talking about the Arakoa history, their religions, their myths, and you see a lot of aspects of their culture, the original Arakoa, the High Arakoa, and to my knowledge, most of it was done by the designer Don Adams, who did a great job on all of that. So, Arakoa are one of my favorites. And, one advantage you have with Arakoa is that they're not very dimorphic species. Because they're birds. To our eyes, the males and females look the same. There is probably, in universe, there's probably, very minor differences in the body language, in movement or in voice that only they can really discern between each other. But to us, the males and females all look the same. So you could just plop one model for all of them, and maybe if you you could, instead of body 1, body 2, you could pick voice 1, voice 2, and pick a feminine voice or a masculine voice. So Arakoa were always one of my favorites and one of my top picks for a playable race. Obviously. My second top race on this list is one that has been long overdue, literally decades in the making. And that's, of course, ogres. Ogres have been in the Warcraft universe for decades. They have been there since the very inception, since Warcraft 1. The ogres have already been there. like Turok in the Dead Mines. It was probably the first ogre we met, and they have been with us all this time. And I think at some point they were planned to be one of the player races in World of Warcraft, but that never materialized. And now WoW is over 20 years old, and we still don't have them. And sure, they're ugly, but like I already said, I love ugly races. Because when all these very pretty, very human-looking races, they all start looking very samey after some time. Even in a Blizzard game, when they try to make a different, unique model for every race they introduce, even here, all these pretty races start looking same. So ogres would have a very unique appearance, very unique silhouette that would be very striking. And they're ogres. They're funny. They're dumb and funny. For the same reason as goblins are a great player race, because goblins are also ugly, but they have a very unique aesthetic, very unique humor to them. And similarly, ogres have a very different, very opposing sense of humor to them, which still would go along well with this. And Blizzard themselves said ages ago that they couldn't think of how to make the female model. Like, how hard can that be? Like, just make her ugly. She doesn't have to be a supermodel. Just make her fat. It's okay. We can have a fat lady in the game. Like, we got cool tyrants now. Don't tell me this is what bodybuilder female models should look like. So no, we can have fat ladies in the game. Just make the ogres. Like, how long have we been waiting for it? But if we're not getting ogres, what else we could be getting? This is my 2.A race. Mocknathal, the half-ogres. Half-ogres, half-orcs. And represented most commonly by Rexxar. Rexxar was one of my favorite characters in Warcraft for a good long while, because of his story in the Warcraft 3 orc campaign, the Frozen Throne orc campaign, which was like added on RPG campaign instead of the RTS campaign. And his story there was that he was this unlikely hero that was thrust into a position of power, and he did well with it, and the Horde respected him for it in the end. And I really liked that story. I thought it was a very aspiring story, a story that resonated very well with me. So, I love the Mocknathal, the half-ogres, since then. And apparently they're not just, half-breeds, that an orc father and an ogre mother, or vice versa. Because in the Burning Crusade we met a whole village of them. So, and turns out Rexxar's father was a half-ogre too, so it's a whole race of these guys out there. And even in my game I have a bunch of NPCs that I love messing with the Rexxar model, and I created a whole bunch of Mocknathal NPCs with very different roles, very different characters. Like, I have Baxen Pariash, PhD, who is a scholar from Gilneas, because when he was a baby, he was a huge baby because he was a half-ogre. So the Horde, the old Horde, sent him to war as a baby, and then he got captured by a Gilnean noble who got enamored with the giant baby and adopted him. And now the guy is a scholar in Gilneas, who, of course, had to face his fair share of persecution in his time growing up, but he's technically a Gilnean noble, so people can't do much against him. I have Torfang, who is mok'nathal druid, who is one of my oldest character concepts. And Torfang serves as a chief of security at the Tower of Krasha. It doesn't really do much in the story, but he's just hanging around there, just being chill. And even on Earth, we have a Mocknathal, Baron Peak Ripper. He's on Earth because he came with the Horde, with the Red Horde, when they crashed on Earth 15 years ago with Ner'zhul's forces. So I love messing with this model. Of course, we have a fourth NPC because we have Max Rockman, who ended up in the whole NPC roster in the tower. Max Rockman, who is a canon Beastmaster from Warcraft 3. So I love Mocknathal, I love the half-ogres because of Rexar, because of all these dudes that I have running around in my game. So if we can't have ogres, let's have those guys. And the size of either ogres or Mocknathal isn't really a problem because we have seen ogres and half-ogres that are the size of regular people. Maybe like just a Tauren size, just a little bit bigger. And even if most ogres aren't, just resize the ones that we get to play. And regarding ogres, there was even that old April Fool's joke of making two-headed ogres playable. And Blizzard treated it as just a joke at the time, but the two-player ogres, two-headed ogres are really, as played by two players, have some serious design issues, and I don't mean just how do you put a hat on? I mean if you're played by two players, and one of them quits, what happens? Do you have only half a power you used to have, or do you get to control the other guy when he's not there? What's happening there? It's not impossible to solve, but there are some serious design issues in those two-headed ogres, and I'm not asking them to do that. Just make regular ogres and maybe give them two heads, and then leave it to the role players to talk funny with the second head, But that's enough for ogres and ogre adjacent races. My top third race is Ethereals. My friend loves Ethereals. What he is doing in his campaign in our game is largely about Ethereals and Karesh, and Canon is probably going to contradict him very soon, but we're happy knowing that we're doing our own thing that doesn't have to align with the canon anymore. But Ethereals. So many people love Ethereals, so many people want Ethereals playable, and I agree with them that Ethereals are a really great player option. They have a very unique aesthetic. They are very important to the lore. They have unique architecture, culture. They have a lot of what we are currently missing in World of Warcraft. We don't even have a lot of really Middle Eastern aesthetic in WoW currently. When I try to make VTT maps for my game using the WoW assets, I usually have the hardest time coming up with maps for stuff that happens in the Middle East because we don't really have Middle Eastern aesthetics a lot. The closest thing we have is Uldum, which is specifically Egyptian. And if I want to have something that looks Arabic, it's much harder. Arabic or Iranian, it's much harder to get. And Ethereals could really introduce those Middle Eastern aesthetics to WoW. Remember when there was that Tel Aviv rumor going around, which proved unfortunately untrue, because I thought it was actually sounded like a great idea. Tel Aviv itself, and having some kind of caliphate in there. I thought it sounded like a very cool idea, and it's unfortunately proved untrue. But Ethereals could really introduce those aesthetics for us. And one more word about Ethereals, because I have seen people going around saying that player character models for Ethereals have been added in the War Within. They absolutely have not. A lot of that is probably because of Bellular, because he made a thumbnail that he changed since then, a thumbnail that says player character models found, and showed the NPC model of Ethereals. Okay, listen, if you're listening to this is not a player character model. This is an NPC model. Here's a very quick lesson that I can get into in a separate video sometime, but models of creatures in World of Warcraft are internally divided into two types of models: character models and creature models. Character models are mostly player character races. There are some NPC races that get those character models like Naga, some Naga, not all of them, Raiko, and goblins used to have a character model since vanilla, but they were playable only in Cataclysm. So not all of the character models are player models, but virtually all player race models are character models, with the only exception being kind of Dragthyr, because what's the difference is the character models can equip any gear the players have because they don't have the gear baked onto them. The character model itself is naked, except for lingerie and like cloaks and like various small bits of gear that can be tacked onto them. But otherwise the character is naked, and the gear is a separate model that is added on top of the character. Creature models have all their gear baked onto them. They come with the gear already equipped. This ethereal model added in the War Within is a creature model. They come with all their gear on them. And yes, there have been races that started as creature models and then have become character models, but when they did, they needed a new character model anyway. So having this new model in the War Within proves nothing, because if they become player characters, they will need a new model, another new model anyway. And if anything, that having a new model makes them less likely to become a player race, because then they would have to make 2 new models for them in very short succession, and they wouldn't want to waste those resources on it. But, I would love to see them playable. I don't think it's going to happen very soon, but it might be in Midnight, it might be possible. But so far we have seen no evidence of it either way, even if I would have loved to see that. My next race on the list is one that I have also seen in many wish lists, and that is Sethrak. Like, Blizzard, come on, why haven't we gotten them with Vulpera? Like, they're very close lore counterparts. Sethrak and Vulpera have been these enemies and allies tied to the history of Uldoon. When you were giving us Vulpera, why didn't you give us Sethrak with them? Instead you gave us diaper gnomes. Like, I don't hate mecha gnomes, but I really think they should have been like full mecha gnomes. They should have been full mechanical. Instead of this like halfway point where nobody is satisfied, either people who like gnomes or people who like machines, nobody is satisfied in the end, and they just look silly, like they're wearing diapers. So maybe they should have given us full mecha gnomes, but with Vulpera they should have given us Sethrak, because Sethrak are also a great unique aesthetic, a very unique aesthetics, very unique model. And if Vulpera look kind of part goblin, these guys were compared to Worgen. They're not really use Worgen models or animations in any way. Like, maybe they did it at one early point in BFA, but really Sethrak were one of the greatest parts of BFA, and I would have loved to play one. So if we're talking about BFA, let's go to the race that I thought that once we had Vulpera and Mechanopes, what could we get as a counterpart to Sethrak if we were introducing Sethrak in another patch? And this is not going to be on top of a lot of player lists, but it is definitely somewhat on top of my lists, because the next race I want to talk about is Kasir. Kasir, the little not quite faceless one dudes from BFA, from Kultiras? I know, not a very popular option that not a lot of people talk about, but if we were getting Vulpera, there was a theory going about that all those allied races we were getting were reflecting the existing main player races. Like we got orcs and we got Magar, we got Vulpira and for goblins, and we got Mechanims for gnomes. Obviously, we got like Lightforged Draenei for Draenei. So if Sethrak was supposed to be the Worgen allied race, one of the remaining options for an allied race were an undead allied race, a race that looks undead, and these guys use the undead animations. They largely based on the undead animations, and having a group of Kasir who were broken free from the old gods but remain looking squiddy. Maybe they can shift into a human form like Worgen do. They can shift into a human form, but normally they look all squiddy. Maybe we could have that as the undead allied race, and frankly I really like that option because I just like the aesthetic of that squiddy looking race. And funny story, funny quote unquote, because it's not very funny, it's just RP and WoW is weird kind of story, because we were role playing in World of Warcraft, and I mentioned something like build up background, like tell about things that my character was doing when we weren't online. My character was visiting the Void Elves, and there was a freed Kasir in there somewhere that was free from the old gods, that the Void Elves were helping. Do you think that sounds unreasonable, that the Void Elves would be doing something like that? I don't think so. It's unreasonable that they would be doing that, but the role player I was playing with decided that me having a character concept that disagrees with her character concept, because she was Kultiran too. Me having a character that disagrees with her character concepts is such an egregious violation of role-playing etiquette that she decided that she off-screen went to the Void Elves and assassinated that Kasir and came back to tell me about it. She thought that having a character that was different from her character was so egregious that she went and literally told me that she off-screen killed my character. What? Dude, what? Like, role-playing in WoW is weird, man. Like, having since gotten back into, like, TTRPG circles since then, like, I look back on how it was in World of Warcraft, and man, it is weird. It's weird. Like, we are still weird in my game on Discord. We are still weird because we came out of World of Warcraft where things are being done very weirdly, very differently than a typical TTRPG campaign. So we still play in a very weird way. But, I don't think assassinating someone else's character because it disagrees with your character concept is a reasonable reaction, Anyway, my next top race is also probably not very popular, not talked about a whole lot, but I really think that it would be popular if it came out, because I want Saberons. You probably forgot about those guys, right? But you know what we don't have in WoW? We don't have cat people. Why don't we have a cat people playable race? Come on, Blizzard. You know how popular a cat race would be? It would instantly become one of the most popular playable races ever. Like people say like, oh, the Saberons are so primitive. Like, yeah, they're not, like, orcs are not very advanced, like a little bit more advanced than Saberons, but you could teach the Saberons something. There were some smart Saberons that you could befriend in Warlords of Draenor. So I imagine them playing in the same kind of role like the Draken. I think they were called the Draken in Wildstar. the Draken, who were like this also quote-unquote savage race that was like being adopted by this high-tech Dominion, I think it was called, in Wildstar. And they were like learning this technology, and they were like being funny, being like clunky, clumsy with this. And I think that they could play the same kind of role if they were added as a playable race. For example, to the Horde, they could like hang around goblins, like try to work with the goblin technology and breaking it because they don't know how to work technology. But you know, cat people would instantly become one of the top player races in the game, you know. And you know, yes, Warlords of Draenor was in an alternate timeline, which is now closed off, and in the main timeline they're supposed to be all dead. But at the end of the Magar questline, when we will recruit them from Draenor, as it dies behind them, we see a few different creatures like slink away in the shadows. So we could seed in like Botanai and Saberons escaping with those Magar orcs and resurfacing now. Like, or maybe there's a part of Draenor, like the Spires of Arak broke off when Draenor split apart, and now we find the Spires of Arak again, and the Saberons are all over the place. And we can recruit those guys as a player race. Like, I mean, we have Darkspear Trolls as a player race, and there's like 100 of them lore-wise. And they are still a major player race. So why can't we have those Saberons? I think cat people would be really popular. And it looks like when I go off script, or when I do a mostly unscripted video, I really start to rant and ramble about things instead of making short, like 15-minute videos. So this video got really long, and I'm going to cut it in half. So this is the point where I'm cutting off this video, and you will see the second half in a few days from now, which will continue the list and see some more very popular and some less popular races very soon. So if you think you can predict what other races I'm adding in the second half, let me know in the comments below. And otherwise, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And if you want to support the channel, I don't have a Patreon, but you can do it on my Ko-fi page, linked in the video description below. And I hope to see you next time.